Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza keep making one confession after another. What are they revealing? First, one confession, then another. And suddenly, fans are looking back at Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza in a completely different way. For years, AlDub fans have carried memories of the chemistry that made Alden and Maine one of the most talked-about pairs in Philippine entertainment. Their Kalyeserye story became a phenomenon, and even after their professional paths changed, fans continued to wonder what really happened behind the scenes. Now, whenever either Alden or Maine opens up about that unforgettable chapter, fans listen closely. Because sometimes one sentence from the past can change the way an entire love team story is remembered. The story that fans never completely let go. Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza became household names together during the AlDub era. Their on-screen relationship captured the imagination of millions. What began as an unexpected television pairing developed into a massive fandom, with supporters following their every interaction. For fans, Alden and Maine weren't simply actors playing characters. They became Alden and Maine. That emotional connection made every interview, appearance, and comment about their relationship feel important. And that's why their later revelations have continued to attract attention. When Alden finally opened up, one of the most talked-about moments came when Alden spoke openly about his feelings for Maine. In a 2023 interview with Boy Abunda, Alden acknowledged that he had fallen for Maine and said that he had confessed his feelings to her. He also described AlDub as his biggest romance and, in a sense, his biggest breakup. Sight turned search terms. For longtime fans, that was a major revelation. After years of speculation, they finally heard Alden acknowledge that what happened era wasn't completely emotionless behind the cameras. But his confession also made the story more complicated. Because having real feelings doesn't automatically mean two people are destined to become a couple. Sometimes feelings exist. Sometimes people care deeply about each other. And sometimes life simply takes them in different directions. Maine's side of the story matters. Maine has also spoken over the years about her experiences during the AlDub phenomenon and the intense attention surrounding their partnership. Her perspective is important because the AlDub story wasn't only Alden's story, it was also hers. Imagine becoming one of the country's most recognizable celebrities almost overnight, while millions of people are emotionally invested in your relationship with another person. Every smile can become a headline. Every interaction can become a rumor. Every interview can lead to another question. That kind of attention can be overwhelming. Why every new confession gets fans talking? The reason is simple. Fans want to know what was real. They saw the chemistry. They saw the closeness. They watched the story unfold. And many wondered whether the emotions they were seeing on screen continued behind the scenes. When Alden or Maine later discusses that period, even a small detail can feel like another missing piece of a much bigger puzzle. That's why old interviews suddenly resurface. That's why clips get shared again. And that's why fans can spend hours comparing what Alden said years ago with what Maine has said more recently. But there is a difference between a confession and a reunion. This is where fans should be careful. Alden's admission that he had feelings for Maine doesn't mean that the two are secretly getting back together. Likewise, Maine talking about their past doesn't necessarily mean a romantic reunion is coming. Sometimes a confession is simply closure. Sometimes it's an honest reflection on a chapter of life. And sometimes people can look back on a relationship with affection without wanting to recreate it. That's especially important when discussing celebrities whose personal lives are constantly watched by the public. AlDub was bigger than romance. Perhaps that's what people sometimes forget. AlDub wasn't successful only because fans believed Alden and Maine might become a real-life couple. The phenomenon had humor, storytelling, memorable characters, social media excitement, and a unique connection with its audience. The fans became part of the experience. They waited for developments. They created hashtags. They celebrated milestones. They supported the stars' projects, and they built a community around the story. That is why the AlDub legacy remains powerful, even though the original Kalyeserye era ended years ago. The biggest question is still, what really happened? That's the question that keeps the conversation alive. What happened between Alden and Maine behind the scenes? How much of the chemistry was acting? How much was genuine affection? What did they really feel during those years? And did they ever seriously consider becoming a couple? Some of those questions have been answered over the years. Others may never receive a complete answer. Perhaps that's why the fascination continues. Mystery keeps nostalgia alive. Both stars have grown. There's another side to this story that deserves attention. Alden and Maine aren't the same young entertainers they were when AlDub exploded. Both have grown professionally. Both have experienced different projects. Both have developed their own identities. And both have had to learn how to live beyond the expectations that came with being part of such a massive love team. That's not always easy. When millions of people associate you with one person, proving that you can stand independently can be a challenge. But Alden and Maine have done exactly that. Could more confessions be coming? That's the question fans naturally ask whenever one of them opens up. If Alden has shared more about his feelings, will Maine reveal more of her side? Could another interview uncover details fans never knew? Could the two eventually sit down together and talk about the AlDub years? Nobody can say for certain, and unless they personally confirm something, speculation should remain just that, speculation. But one thing is undeniable: people are still interested. Maybe the real story isn't about getting back together. Perhaps fans don't actually need Alden and Maine to become a couple again. Maybe what they want is understanding. They want to know what those years meant to the two people who lived through them. They want to hear Alden's memories. They want to hear Maine's memories. And they want to understand how two young entertainers handled becoming the center of one of the biggest fandoms in Philippine television. That story could be just as fascinating as a romantic reunion. One confession can change everything. The beauty, and sometimes the danger, of celebrity confessions is that they can completely change how fans remember the past. A moment that once looked like acting can suddenly seem different. A smile that seemed scripted can suddenly feel more meaningful. A scene fans thought was purely fictional can take on another layer. That's why Alden's admission about his feelings became such a major talking point. It didn't rewrite AlDub's history, but it gave fans another perspective. And that's why they still care. Years may have passed, careers may have changed, lives may have moved forward, but the AlDub story remains a powerful piece of Philippine pop culture. And whenever Alden or Maine reveals something about that chapter, fans naturally lean closer, because they aren't simply listening to another celebrity interview. They're listening for the missing pieces of a story they once followed every day. Maybe there won't be another love story. Maybe there won't be another AlDub chapter. But as long as Alden and Maine continue to share honest memories about that unforgettable era, fans will keep listening, because sometimes the most powerful ending isn't a reunion. It's finally understanding what happened in the first place.